All right, hello, Mr. H here, and this is week 5 of Purdue University's Special Education Summer EDPS course 51500. And a key takeaway from the previous week that I'd like to discuss here is some sources of bias that affect the reliability between our inter-observer agreements, right? So when we take data, we look to that inter-observer agreement, and we want a high percentage of that to know that our data is reliable and good for us to use, that we can sort of count on it. And these are some sources of bias that may affect that and some remedies for them. So the first one is reactivity, right? So reactivity is just when a student is going to act differently because they know they're being observed, right? So this can happen when new people enter the room. I'm sure we've all been there. You have a student being evaluated for services. This person, especially behavioral services, whoever the evaluator is, enters your room and absolutely nothing happens. And then you're left sitting there being like, well, I promise this happens all the time, this, that, and the other. So ways to kind of remedy this, obviously, you want the observations to be as covert as possible. Maybe make it appear that you're observing the whole classroom and not one person in particular. Try to have somebody that's familiar, that's in and out of your room a lot, so that way it wouldn't be a huge disturbance to have this new presence, and things like that. Obviously, like the age of your students may affect this, different things, but just kind of make that more natural so it doesn't affect the flow of the room so much by having a stranger there. Another one is called observer drift. So this is the tendency for observers to change how stringently they apply that operational definition, right? So your operational definition is what's defining your behavior, and it's what the basis of observation is being created around. So a good rule of thumb is just to always have that definition on the observation sheet, so that way they can review it every time before they make observations. And then even coming back together as a team, throughout the entire school year or whatever your observational period is, and just reviewing that definition and making sure that everybody's sticking to the same standard of recording. See this a lot, actually, especially whenever you have a student who may have a tracker or some observational tool that follows them across multiple class periods, subject areas, and whatnot. And the drift between observers can be huge, right? Next, we have complexity. So this one, it comes down to what observational coding system you're using, and sort of, how much stuff, how busy the screen looks or the document looks or things like that, right? So you could be using legend coding where you have all these different letters and it's in a legend way up here to the side and they have to mark each one in each box. You could use one where the codes actually appear within the document, or you can use it to where they appear as sort of rows that go across and you just put check marks. They each have their plus, their positive and negatives to say, but you just want to keep it as specific and short as possible. You don't want too many options, right? So the more options, the more complex, the more variability you're going to get between observers, right? And lastly, we have expectancy. So this one's really hard. So this is where you're butting up against the preconceived notions that the observer has about the subject being observed. This one's hard. It's hard to combat. The more time you spend with a student, the more information you have maybe beforehand, or maybe even that you gather throughout the year, is going to lend itself towards bias. So again, I'd say the best way to combat this is kind of having that clear definition, reinforcing it, continually meeting with the team, right? So making sure that everybody's looking for the same things and just narrowly dividing it enough to where their own bias can't make it subjective, right? So obviously, if I have examples of keywords or phrases that a student might be using, if let's say the behavior is like having how they talk, how they communicate, right? The more clear I can be on that, the less expectancy we're going to get. Actually, that's more of a bias. But the more clear I can be on that, then it doesn't really matter if I have one teacher who really interprets, negative or aggressive language this way versus one that interprets it another way, because my definition is telling them the minimum requirements that need to be in that interaction to make it observable and recordable, right? So just to go over those again, so those are reactivity, observer drift, complexity, and expectancy, right? And each of these can affect the reliability of our data collection, which is going to hit our inter-observer agreement, which is just the percentage of similarity between multiple observers. So yeah, thanks for listening.